All right, hello. So this video, I'm going to go over the new AI system I've added to ParkEngine. You may notice a few other changes, like up here, the UI looks a little different. A couple changes have happened in the past, what's it been, almost a year since I posted? Actually, I don't know. It's been a long time. Anyways, so over here on the right, you will see the enemy spawner editor script here in the inspector. This basically just controls a variety of parameters that you can modify to change how an AI will spawn and what stats go along with it and all their behavior and whatnot. I'll go over all what these do a little later. I'm going to actually modify the AI by itself using these same parameters. They're all pretty much the same, but I'll just briefly go over what this tool does. So if I walk within the range of the spawner, it should spawn on its own, but in this particular case it won't because I have it disabled. So I'm just going to manually spawn an enemy in. Yep, there he is. And you can see he kind of just follows me around and he's starting to hit me and all that. Let me go ahead and turn him off. There we go. Okay. So that's that. Over here in the options, it's got a few parameters that we can go through. Really quick, the spawn radius is how close do you have to be in order for them to automatically spawn in. Textures is what textures do you want them to spawn in with. This is pretty specific to my game. There's a male and a female generic model for now, and they use the same UV map and all that, so I just swap textures out to make them look a little different. Stats, this is other stuff I'll go over a little later. And behavior and data, I will go over behavior more, but data for now. Some of these things don't change. Action rate, it's basically an irrelevant variable, but you don't change it, but it's how quickly do they decide to do something, and this one is set to every 0.05 seconds. Guard release, basically they won't stop blocking until 25 frames after the last frame of hit stun occurs. You can lower this if you want to make an enemy more responsive, but I usually leave it at this just to make it feel like you're not getting immediately countered every time you do something. Smart guard window. So this is basically if they parry you, this is how long they will wait in frames to try and guard. Generally speaking, I don't let the enemies parry. There is an option to do it, but I don't think that's going to be a whole lot of fun for a lot of people to deal with that, so I don't usually use it, but the option's there. Escape distance, how far do you have to get away for them to stop chasing you? Chase distance, how far will they chase you? And camera distance, this is no longer used, but the camera used to lock into AI. It doesn't anymore, but this is how far the camera would respect how far away they were. Return distance, similar to escape distance, but they won't start walking back to their spawn point until you've exceeded this point. And attack check, this is irrelevant, so I'm not going to go over it. And a lot of this other stuff is pretty useful. So proxy guard range, how far away plus a little bit extra range will they try to block you. Same with parry and projectiles. They all function the same. It's just how far away is something before they start to guard. This number is a bit of distance added on to how it calculates how far away they should block. So, like for example, if I swing this attack, it basically takes how large the hitbox is, and it will do a tiny bit of math to determine how far away, like the max point of the actual hit is. And then it'll take a little bit extra with proxy guard range, add that much on top of that so that it'll block a little earlier just to be safe. Otherwise, if this number is too low, sometimes they don't block in time and they just get hit even though they're not supposed to. Okay, so then when I spawn the enemy in, before I do, I'm going to set this down and spawn them in. Oops, uncheck that. There we go. Okay, so now let me switch over to the actual enemies information. Okay, so if we look at this, it's really slowing the system down because there's a lot going on, but I'll just briefly talk about it. So some of this stuff is just picking up generic stuff, but see, it's found, I'm the closest player, obviously I'm the only one here. It looks for the closest players out of everybody, but since I'm the only one, it just grabbed me. Tracks my position. It's looking for a projectile only if one exists. View distance, how far away can he see? Field of view, you know, the cone, or sorry, the viewing cone is FOV. It's just at what angles can they actually see you. So if you get behind them and you can basically sneak up on people or the enemies and get away with it as long as this cone is small enough. All right, so stats. This is basically the enemy stats. It's very similar to the player stats. HP is how much life they have. MP, that's not really used anymore, but it's how much magic points do they have. Stamina, power, how much damage can they do. Special, how much special damage do they do. Defense isn't explicitly used anymore. It's all just standardized, but you know, defense. This one doesn't get used anymore, but it basically controls how much invincibility certain moves have. But again, this is standardized. Speed, how fast can they move around. All right, now we're going to get into like the actual behavior here. So I have his mobility set to 100. If, just say for example, I drop it down to -1, he'll look at me, but he won't follow me. So if I take that same number and I put it, let's say to 46 or something, once I get into range, oh wait, whoops, wrong number. I modified offense. I guess you got to see what offense did, but let's go over mobility first. So if mobility, ooh, let's get that unselected. So if mobility is kind of low, instead of running at you, they'll creep on you like that. There is a slight chance that they will run at you at full speed. The higher that number is, basically the higher chance it is that they'll run at you at full speed. Pretty much anything less than that is a slow walk. So if you reset his logic, and he's just going to go straight for a walk like that. Yeah, he's just going to keep walking because that number is so low. So let me go ahead. I'm just going to pause it from this point on and then modify each variable accordingly. So mobility at 100 is him running at full speed. You saw offense, so let's go ahead and just max that out. And now, once he's in attack range, he'll just relentlessly attack as much as he can. I give the AI some cooldown on their attack so they just don't spam you too much, to kind of simulate them taking some time to think about what they're going to do. But see that he's not immediately attacking me, so that's good. There's about a 1 to 2 second cooldown on all of his attacks, so we just won't keep doing it. So great. So he only has one combo set up, so he's just going to keep doing that particular string. He also won't lock at you in the middle of a combo, but he will snap to you at the end. There's ways to kind of smooth out the turning speed, but generally speaking, I kind of like it being instant, so I just leave it at that. So let's go ahead and change something else. You also notice some textures are missing. I'm redesigning some stuff, so it's just like that for now. All right, so let's go ahead and do offense alt. So this is a secondary attack he has access to. He'll do it when he can't do the first one, so let's go ahead and see how that works. And that's his secondary right there, that large swing. And it's a guard-breaking swing, so it's not one you want to block. But it's very slow, so you can either dodge it or try to parry it. So I'll show the dodge, and you can just dodge right through it. And that's the parry, and you can respond. So that's the alt offense. There's also a couple other parameters on offense that I can adjust, like the offense range. This is basically, it's similar to another parameter I had where it's trying to detect your hit range. This one, it's looking for its own offense range, and if you want, you can tell it to try to swing much earlier. This isn't something I use too often. I usually use this if they have a projectile, so if I want them to, fire it from, a minimum of 15.94 units away, then they'll do that. Otherwise, it'll try to get point blank, and that's usually not ideal. So here's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to turn the offense down completely. It's going to keep walking up to me, and I'm going to put the defense, I'm going to max this out. Okay, so now he should just block all of my attacks. Yep. So the higher the defense number is, the more likely they are going to block. So obviously at 100, he's not gonna get hit by anything. You can't even get behind him and hit him. They'll just block absolutely everything. The one thing you can get through is grabbing them, because those aren't blockable. But again, there are ways to get around that, so I'll touch on that as well. This isn't 100% functional at the moment, but if you put technique all the way up, I think it's technique, it might be intelligence, I forget. Let's find out. If I put technique up, nope, so it's not technique. So let's drop that back and put intelligence up. Again, it might actually be technique, but this function doesn't always work. Yeah, so you actually saw him try to do it. There's just something wrong with the particular AI move. So he actually is breaking the guard, or the grab, I mean. But just for whatever reason, it's not connecting. But it does work, so he should still block everything. And they're smart enough to that the instant they're allowed to block, they do it. This is very similar to what players can do. You can actually cancel your get up animation directly into a block, much like you can do in most fighting games. Anyways, let's move on to the next thing. So let's click this. I'm going to turn the defense down to 0. I'm going to leave the mobility alone, drop the intelligence. So let's put evasion all the way up. So similar to defense, this is going to make it so that instead of trying to block, he's going to dodge through everything you do. And it will perfectly do it every single time if you set it to 100. So ideally, you wouldn't set it to 100, because this can be very frustrating. And they usually will just dodge straight through you. There are ways to make it so it'll pick a random direction. Also, it is possible to catch them on the end of the dodge if you're paying attention. So it's not like it's unbeatable, but yes, it can be quite irritating if it's like that for too long. And luckily, the moves, like that particular move I just did, is a counter attack. So if you hit somebody in the back, then you can, do a nice long stun and do a large combo like I just showed. So that's evasion. Let's move on to the next thing. So retreat, you would put this up to make them run away. So you wouldn't just leave this by itself. So let's say we give them some mobility, some retreat, and let's put their offense a little high. So what this is supposed to do in this particular combination is they'll attack, and then when they can't attack, they should try to back off. Like, so right there. So he's cooling down, so he tries to back off a little bit. So this kind of gives you an illusion of somewhat of an intelligent play, like, maybe he's trying to space you out a bit. So that's retreat. It's not something you would use on its own, otherwise he would just run away all the time. It's only really set to retreat when he has no attack options. That's how the logic is set up. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Technique, this one is probably not quite working at the moment. So let me see. What it's supposed to do is that if you knock them on the ground, they're supposed to immediately try to get up as fast as possible. Whoops, wrong move. Yeah, so it isn't quite working at the moment, but that is what it's supposed to do. Okay, so intelligence is hard to show unless I have another enemy around, but let's explain it really quick. So how this works? Oh, actually, no. Sorry, intelligence isn't actually functional. Teamwork is the other one I want to talk about. So this one, if he has, because you can hit your teammates in this game. If this is low, the enemy will just relentlessly attack you with no regard to his teammates around him. But if it's higher, the higher it is, the better chance he's got of trying to consider his teammates around. So you won't blatantly try to hit the teammates if they're attacking. You'll try to give them some space before they do what they're supposed to do. Actually, on that note, intelligence also is the one function of it right now is that if an enemy is detecting you attacking another one of its teammates, and intelligence is high, they won't try to butt in to get themselves hit. Basically, consider intelligence as self-preservation. That in combination of teamwork, they kind of fight each other, but finding a good balance of the two is ideal. So we've already gone over all this other stuff. So if we scroll down a little bit, a lot of this is debug information, but the interesting thing about all the AI opponents in the game is they use the exact same logic and the exact same input system that players do. So technically speaking, you could take over an AI character and play as them. The only difference is there's a script, which is this right here, the AI controller, which acts as a brain that presses buttons. So the AI is actually pressing buttons, and here's some input debug stuff you could look at. So that is something interesting. Using that system, they can also use any of player animations or player moves. You can pretty much just drag and drop them and they work. So that is AI right now. The one drawback to how complex the AI is at the moment is because, again, they do use the same system as players do. It does create some sort of a limitation. You can't have an infinite amount of enemies on the screen. I mean, you can't pretty much in any game, but because they're so complicated, there's a limit depending on what platform you're going for. I've been able to put 30 on the screen, and it gets kind of choppy, so I generally don't do that. I usually put maybe 5 or 6 at the same time, but there are systems in place to prevent as much of that issue as possible. So right now I'm really far away from him because he can't possibly engage, and I'm outside of his attraction zone. It pretty much just shuts off a lot of the CPU heavy calculations. In fact, it shuts off most of them. And really right now, all it's looking for is the closest player it can find. So at this point, this is where it would start chasing me if the movement was high. This is about where everything would turn right back on and he would start functioning again. But you exceed that point and it just sort of stops and it just looks for you. So that is one bit of memory and CPU saving, well, not memory, but CPU saving security systems, I guess I put into it. But anyways, that's AI. Yeah, thanks for watching. Until next time.